Good evening. My name is Melissa Williams, and I serve as the president of the Washington County Board of Education. Welcome to the members of the Board of Education, the superintendent, staff, and the community to the Board of Education's public business meeting. Everyone is participating in this meeting using a telephone or an electronic device. It has always been the practice of the Washington County Board of Education to meet in person and to invite members of the public to the board's meetings. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, certain legal directives, and the need to safeguard the health of the community, it is necessary to participate in this public meeting by phone or an electronic device. Today's business meeting will be recorded, and the public may access the public meeting now on Channel 99, Facebook, and on Washington County Public Schools website at wcpsmd.com/school-board/meetings. The public comment portion of the meeting will not take place. The Board of Education encourages the public to submit their comments in writing to boe@wcps.k12.md.us, and the information provided will be distributed to board members and the superintendent. At this time, I call to order the public business meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. Dr. Bishop, if you would, please call the roll so that we may determine if we have a quorum of board members present.
Okay. Mr. Bickford?
Here.
Mrs. Fisher?
Here.
Mr. Gaspard?
Here.
Mrs. Murray?
Here.
Mr. Ridenhour? Mr. Ridenhour? Mr. Stauffer?
Here.
Mrs. Williams?
Here.
And Mr. Mackley?
Here.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. By my count, we have 6 board members and our student representative present, so we do in fact have a quorum. This evening, we're happy to have a student join us who will be saying the Pledge of Allegiance. His name is Colton Hahn, and he's a 5th grade student at Williamsport Elementary School. Colton, when you're ready, please begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Colton. Colton, are you there?
Yeah.
We're very appreciative of you being here with us this evening and saying the pledge for us.
Thank you.
And Colton, I hope you have a great summer.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, we'll move to the approval of this evening's agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the agenda. Mrs. Murray?
Thank you, Mrs. Murray.
Mrs. Fisher seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Any discussion? Hearing none.
Mrs. Williams, on the agenda, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda for the consent items to be discussed. Exhibit 2, 3, 10, and 17.
Okay, would you repeat those, please?
Yes. Items number 2, 3, 10, and 17.
Okay, and your amendment then is to,
For review of, pull those out for further discussion.
okay, so Mr. Gesford, you're asking us to remove from the consent agenda items 2, 3, 10, and 17.
For further discussion, yes,
For further consideration.
yes.
Is there a second to Mr. Gesford's motion, or yes, Mr. Gesford's motion for an amendment?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Okay, Mr. Gesford's amendment is to pull from the consent agenda items 2, 3, 10, and 17 for further discussion or additional discussion. We'll move to the vote on the amendment. Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour, Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 affirmative votes with the student member concurring. So the amendment passes. So the motion then with the amendment needs to be voted on. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Madam President, this is Mrs. Fisher.
Yes.
I would like to amend the I don't know if I'm amending, the amendment or amending the amended motion, but I would like to add item number 8 to that list.
Okay, Mrs. Fisher, I think what we need to do is to make that a second amendment.
Okay,
So Mrs. Fisher is requesting an amendment to this evening's consent agenda by pulling item 8 for further
Second.
discussion. Is
Second,
there a second to Mrs. Fisher's amendment?
second,
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll, please, for the vote?
Mr. Gesford,
aye.
Mrs. Murray,
aye.
Mr. Ridenhour, Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Okay, so I have 6 affirmative votes with the student member concurring on the second amendment. So we'll now move to the vote on the agenda, on approval of the agenda. So the consent agenda will exclude items 2, 3, 10, 17, and 8. Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll for the vote on the main motion?
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour, Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Okay, I have 6 affirmative votes with the student member concurring, so we have approval of an amended agenda. Okay, we'll move to the minutes, approval of the minutes.
Mrs. Williams, I move for the approval of the retreat minutes dated Saturday, May 16th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there a second?
Mrs. Fisher seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the retreat of May 16th?
Okay, I've got it. I'm back up. Thanks, Aaron.
Hearing no additions or corrections, Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll for the vote?
Mr. Ridenhour. Mr. Stauffer.
Here.
Mr. Stauffer.
Aye.
Mrs. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Bickford.
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher.
Aye.
Mr. Gesford.
Aye.
And Mrs. Murray.
Aye.
Thank you. I have 6 affirmative votes for the retreat minutes approval. So those minutes stand approved as presented.
Mrs. Williams, I have the second motion for the approval of the closed session minutes dated Tuesday, May 19th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there a second?
Mr. Bickford seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll, please? Oh, let me ask first, are there any additions or corrections to the closed session minutes? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Stauffer.
Aye.
Mrs. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Bickford.
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher.
Aye.
Mr. Gesford.
Aye.
Mrs. Murray. Aye. Mr. Ridenhour.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I have 7 affirmative votes, so the minutes for the closed session dated May 19th stand approved.
Mrs. Williams, I have a final motion for the approval of the business meeting minutes dated Tuesday, May 19th, 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Gesford. Is there a second?
Mr. Bickford seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Are there any additions or corrections to the business meeting minutes dated May 19th, 2020? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Williams.
Aye.
Mr. Bickford.
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher.
Aye.
Mr. Gesford.
Aye.
Mrs. Murray. Aye. Mr. Ridenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer.
Aye.
And Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. We have a unanimous vote for approval of the business meeting minutes dated May 19th with the student member concurring. Thank you to all. This is the time we would normally have public comment, but as I said earlier, the public comment portion of this meeting will not take place. However, the Board of Education encourages the public to submit their comments in writing to boe@wcps.k12.md.us. At this time, we'll move to old business. Our item under consideration is the second amendment to the contract agreement between the Washington County Board of Education and the Washington County Association of Administrators and Supervisors for the 2020-2021 school year. Dr. Michael?
Thank you, President Williams and board members. Tonight, we're back to you with our agreement with the Administrator and Supervisor Association. On January 21st, we asked for your approval of a negotiated equivalent of a negotiated agreement. It's a meet and confer process with the Washington County Association of Supervisors and Administrators. At that time, you approved a tentative agreement with them pending budget approval or budget availability. At this point, unfortunately, the budget is not available to honor that agreement, and tonight we're requesting the board to revise that amendment to reduce what was going to be a 3% raise to a 1% raise. So at this time, we're requesting the board's consideration of a motion and approval to amend the Washington County Association of Supervisors and Administrators contract that was approved on January 21st from a 3% raise to a 1% raise.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Is there a motion?
Madam President, Mrs. Fisher moves to approve the second amendment to the contract agreement between the Washington County Board of Education and the Washington County Association of Administrators and Supervisors for the 2021 school year.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second from Mr. Ridenour.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Any questions or any discussion? Okay, we'll move to the vote. All in favor of the second amendment to the contract agreement between the Washington County Board of Education and the Washington County Association of Administrators and Supervisors for the 2020-2021 school year. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll for the vote?
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Guessford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray. Aye. Mr. Ridenour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I have 7 affirmative votes. The student member concurring, motion carries.
Mrs. Williams, I believe that Dr. Talemko is on the line. He represents the association. I'd like to, if he is there, I'd like to offer him the opportunity to make a brief comment. Also want to thank the administrators group for leading the way and recognizing the budget challenges that we're facing at this time. So Dr. Talemko is there.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. On behalf of the Washington County Association of Supervisors and Administrators, I'd like to take a minute to thank President Williams, the members of the Board of Education, and Dr. Michael for their support and dedication to Washington County Public Schools Administrators Association. This contract will go a long way to ensure the retention of and ability to attract top candidates to WCPS administrative team. Again, I'd like to say thank you for your support and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Telmaco. Dr. Michael, do you have any further comment?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay, then we'll move to our second item of old business, which is the proposed modified fiscal year 2021 general fund operating budget.
Hey, thank you, Mrs. Williams, President Williams, members of the board. Today we met in work session and we looked at modifications that we needed to make to the board's approved FY21 general fund operating budget. Unfortunately, the funding that's available from the state and county at this time is about 3.7 million short of the money needed to fund the budget that was approved by the board in April. And tonight, in work session earlier today, we presented a series of changes that we're recommending to the budget in order to provide a balanced budget based on the available funding. This time, we're seeking your approval on that information. We'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Madam President, this is Mr. Bickford. I move to approve the proposed modifications to the FY 2021 general fund operating budget.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
This is Mrs. Murray. I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any discussion or any questions? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll for the vote?
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Guessford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Fine. Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I have 7 affirmative votes and the student member concurs. So the motion carries. Moving on to new business. Next for our consideration is Dr. Jeffrey Gladhill, Director of Special Education, who will be presenting the local application for federal funds for fiscal year 2021.
Good evening, President Williams, Dr. Michael, members of the board. We would like to ask you to approve the fiscal year 2021 local application for federal funds and staffing plans. We have seen an increase of 88 students eligible for an individualized education program and an increase of $164,218 in funding. This is an increase of 85 cents per student in comparing the proportion of funding per student in fiscal year 2020 to fiscal year 2021. I am happy to assist in answering any questions you may have and would like to request your approval of the fiscal year 2021 local application for federal funds and staffing plan.
Thank you, Mr. Gladhill. Is there a motion?
President Williams, I move to approve the FY 2021 local application for federal funds.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there a second?
Mr. Stauffer, second.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Are there any questions or is there any discussion? Okay, we'll move to the vote. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Guestford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. I have 7 affirmative votes, student member concurring. So the motion carries and we do have approval of the local application for federal funds for fiscal year 2021. Thank you, Mr. Gladhill. Okay, we'll move on to tonight's consent agenda.
Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, Dr. Michael. Tonight, with the amended agenda, I have 13 items for your review. The items were reviewed by our Purchasing Review Committee and are being recommended for approval. And staff is available if you have any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bechtel. Is there a motion?
President Williams, I have a question.
Yes.
So I'm happy to make this motion. Would you like me, I will read the 13 items. And then is the anticipation that then I would make motions on the separate items that were pulled out?
That would be my understanding.
Okay, that's
That
fine.
you will be, do you need a minute to make those notations, Mr. Bickford?
No, I sort of was highlighting as we went, so hopefully I don't mess it up, but
Okay,
please
so,
let me know if I don't.
okay, just to provide some clarification, it's item 2, 3, 10, I'm sorry, 8, 10, and 17. Is that what you have?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Madam President, I move to approve the awards, renewals, and procurements for backup as a service and disaster recovery as a service renewal to Innovative Inc. at a cost of $132,000. Materials of instruction to Lakeshore Learning at approximately $250,000 per fiscal year. Tenable IO Vulnerability Management Software renewal to CDWG at a cost of $91,000. security information and event management software renewal to CDWG at a cost of $77,370. VMware licenses renewal to Dell Inc. at a 5-year total cost of $2,550,387.42. Technology equipment for Sharpsburg Elementary, Vincent Rothgrow Academic Center, and Washington County Technical High to CDWG at a cost of $293,925.95, and to HCGI at a cost of $27,956, and to Apple at a cost of $130,740. Copiers and printers to Centric Business Systems at an approximate yearly cost of $81,456, and to Marco Technologies at an approximate yearly total cost of $266,115. Relocation of portable classroom buildings at multiple schools to Milton Stamper Builders at a cost of $292,000. Security improvements at Smithsburg High School to GRC General Contractor, Inc. at a cost of $387,991. Produce renewal to Reinhardt Orchards, Inc. and Keeney Produce and Gourmet at the unit prices listed. Athletic trainer services renewal to Pivot Athletic Training at a cost of $297,500. Library media content management software renewal to Library Video Company at a cost of $115,480.30. And finally, Zonar GPS system software renewal to Zonar System at a cost of $86,349.84.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Mrs. Murray seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any questions for Mr. Bechtel or any discussion? Okay, we'll move to the vote. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll for the vote?
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer, Mr. Stauffer,
He's muted.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Gesford,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank
Did you
Dr.
get my
Bishop.
vote?
No, we couldn't hear you.
Okay, well, I unmute and it would click back mute right away. So aye.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. We have 7 affirmative votes with the student member concurring, so tonight's amended consent agenda has been approved, has passed.
Madam President, I could go through each one now.
Separately, right?
Yes, that's
make-
my understanding.
I'll make separate motions.
Okay, so you want to begin with number 2.
Correct. So I move to approve the awards, renewals, and procurements for public utility equipment with related accessories and supplies to VersaLift East LLC at a cost of $104,257.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Mrs. Murray seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any questions or discussion?
Yes, Mrs. Williams, I have some questions for the superintendent.
Go ahead, Mr. Gesford.
Okay, thank you. On the aerial platform truck, what does the old aerial lift not reach when it comes to lighting now that, and give a couple locations. You don't need to give them all, but just a few.
I think there was 12 or 13 locations that it didn't reach. I don't have that list immediately in front of me. Maybe Mr. Prue does. I recall It was like the Smithburg Athletic Complex, Ruth Ann Monroe, Greenbrier Elementary. Mr. Prue, can you help me out with some of the other locations?
I can. North Hagerstown High School, Hancock High School, Old Forge Elementary, Fountain Rock, Eastern Elementary, Clear Spring Elementary, South High, Springfield Middle, and Williamsport High School.
Now, are those for the stadium lights?
No, this would not be stadium lights. That takes especially generally a climbing company or something.
Correct. The lights we'll be looking to reach are specifically surface lights, parking lot lights, as well as wall pack lights that perhaps we can't get to now with the current truck because it can only get to what it can get to right above it. This particular unit will actually be able to cantilever off the side of the truck where we can extend without having to get onto the grounds and cause other ruts and depressions on the ground or tear up sidewalks getting to wall pack units.
How often do we use this van?
Our van is limited because it has a limited scope currently. The new truck will get used much more often, and often because we then have to rent a unit from a local contractor, we'll often wait till we have several lights out at a facility before we rent. So this unit is also part of a safety and security plan. We often, if a light goes out, we may have an unsafe condition on our property because we don't have adequate lighting because the light is out because we can't get to it. But because of the cost to rent a vehicle from a local contractor, we may wait till there's 2 or 3 lights out at a particular location. So to say, that we're going to use it once a week, I don't know that I could give you that kind of affirmative information, but we'd definitely be much more active in replacing the lights on our property because we would have the equipment readily available to us at a moment's notice.
Mm-hmm. And what is the cost for the rental of the somebody coming in, I guess, to substitute us out? So when you need it and we don't have what's the rental cost?
It ranges depending on how long we have the truck, but on average, it's about $1,500 per time that we rent the truck. I think over the last year or two, and I just looked at that data, I think we spent over the last 2.5 years approximately about $17,000 to rent the appropriate equipment.
And so how far does this new lift going to take us up? How many feet up does it go?
45 feet.
Okay. Has anyone checked with Ted's Rent It to find out what it costs to rent this type of piece of equipment?
I'm not entirely sure if Ted's has a truck of that nature to rent. I mean, I believe the agreement we have with the local electrical contractor is a lesser price than from a rental company. But we could research that further if the board wishes.
Well, I had called Ted's today, and they have one of the pull behinds that has a battery operated that's self-leveling. So you would pick it up and then move it to wherever the site is. And the boom extends 61 feet in the air, and it rents for $1,000 a week. Now it also rents for $300 a day. But I'm thinking the rental of that, if you plan it out, and I know that's probably, you don't know when lights are going to go, but I think in the past, if you're saying that you've kind of waited to had a few that you could rent and just kind of do this all, once a month, go around and hit all the lights that you need. I think maybe the savings of this would be well worth it just to rent it for a few years until we see that there's more money available for a unit that's, what is it, 99,000? Yeah, 104,000. And when we have issues concerning our budget, it might be a good time to look at, maybe just renting a unit for this reason. I know that it's not a van that you drive, but going and picking one up and pulling it to the locations that you need, you would just, I guess there's some type of mechanism that you hit and it self-levels, and it'd probably be a little bit more work involved, but you'll be saving a lot of money than spending it all at one time when we could really use some money for our CIP budget in the coming years.
Staff is happy to research all options.
Could we push this purchase out for another year or two if we had to?
I don't see any reason why we can't.
Is there any further discussion? Any additional questions?
Yes.
Mrs. Fisher?
I've noticed on the contract for this piece of equipment, there is no mention of either any setup or any training. And because these are very dangerous items, or could be very dangerous items to use, I understand it is usually preferable to have those items clearly stated on the contract. I know that users of this, there must be somebody trained on the job. And I'm afraid that if it's not in the contract, maybe they'll end up charging us extra.
Staff can assure that the training is provided under the contract and make the necessary revisions if the procurement is approved.
How can they make it if it's not in the contract? How can they be assured?
We can request that revision under the purchase price. If they're not willing to make that revision, we can deny the purchase.
Okay. That'll hold true for the next item as well.
Any other questions? Any further discussion?
Mrs. Williams,
Yes, Mrs. Murray.
since Mr. Gesper brought up some things that need to be looked at, and he talked about putting it off for a year or two, would it be possible to table this perhaps until Mr. Prue can get back to us with some more information, and then we could vote on it? Is that a possibility or not, or do we have to go ahead and vote now?
I would think that we would go ahead and vote on it now, and if it's something that we would want to put on a future agenda, that could happen.
Okay, that's what I would like to do. I would like to revisit it with when Mr. Prue comes back with more information.
Any further discuss? Oh, Mr. Reitner, I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Williams. I do know this is a heavy piece of equipment. It's not cheap, obviously. If it's whatever the price is, you can bet that rentals of a piece of equipment like that are substantial. And if it is a piece of equipment that's going to be used, 50 to 100 times a year to replace lights and other items of that type, it makes sense just to go ahead and get it. It's needed. I don't want our service personnel put in jeopardy by using equipment that's not, that we don't have some control over and, maintain. So I'm going to support this. I have no problem supporting it. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Anyone else? I'd just like to say that I appreciate Mr. Ridenour's comment with regard to there is value in having our own equipment that we maintain and that we are confident of, and there are assurances for safety there. So if there are no further questions or no further discussion, we'll move to the vote on approval of the contract for the public utility equipment with related accessories and supplies. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Ridenour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer, Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Nay.
Mr. Gesford,
No.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Mackley,
Aye.
Could we try for Mr. Stauffer again?
Mr. Stauffer,
I'm trying to unmute. Aye, I did answer. I thought it went through.
wonderful.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank-
Stauffer. Okay, by my count, I have 5 affirmative votes, 2 no votes, and the student member concurs with the majority. So the motion carries. We're looking for a motion for item number 3.
Madam President, I move to approve the procurement of full-size and compact construction equipment to Smith's Implements, Inc. at a cost of $99,944.56.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
This is Mr. Reidner, second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Any discussion or any questions?
I have a question, just a real short one.
Yes, Mrs. Fisher?
I believe the company that was just read is Smith's Implements or something. Why is everything just John Deere and there's no reference on any of these contracts or order sheets to the other company?
Mrs. Fisher, Smith Implements is the local John Deere sales distributor, and the Sourcewell contract was awarded to John Deere. You get the pricing from John Deere, but they funnel that through their local distributor.
I just think it's strange, though, that other name doesn't get put on here somewhere.
It does
Yeah,
seem odd.
That's how they.
Yeah, Mr.
Go ahead.
Bick, we're actually purchasing this directly from John Deere. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll cut that. No, actually, we will issue the PO to Smith Implements.
But I mean, our deal is directly on the John Deere contract, is what I've understood some of these other types of contracts like that to be with these big companies. When we
Right,
get,
yeah,
when we get
they
pricing
work
this-
the Sourcewell award is to John Deere.
Right. We wouldn't be able to go out. I couldn't go out as anybody else and go out to John Deere and get this deal. We're getting it through, I'm sorry, out to Smith Implements. You're getting this deal through John Deere is what we've done with other contracts to my knowledge. Thank you.
Correct.
I have a question, Mrs. Williams.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gasser, go ahead.
What actually will this piece of equipment, what would it do for us?
So this unit is, first and foremost, it's replacing a 37-year-old front load type tractor at the transportation site that is used often in snow removal on that site. It's a very large property that takes both trucks and front loaders to remove the snow off of. It's coming with several attachments to both push and blow the snow from that location. Additionally, other attachments to do earthworks are being procured with this item so that we can do landscape trench site work at all of our facilities throughout the system. And it mirrors a unit that was purchased through the Perkins grant for CTE that students will also be using as part of the Students Trade Foundation and the housing project that the foundation does annually, so that we have matching pieces of equipment that can share attachments between them.
And this first one was purchased in February. Do we really need to have 2?
You know, when we look at the equipment that we use system-wide, specifically the unit with the Trades Foundation is going to be on that site a good bit of the year as they are working through it, and they're working through the site work of building the home and working on the grounds work as they as they finalize the outside. The second unit really can be used, again, all season, winter, spring, summer, fall, depending on the conditions, depending on the work that's going to be done. It's clearly enough work that we can do. We often will contract with other vendors to do our site work because we don't always have the appropriate equipment. So this will allow us the opportunity to do that work in-house and save on contractors.
And so the 37-year-old I guess a John Deere tractor that you use, we're going to be getting rid of that?
We'll actually load that on Gov Deals for sale through auction.
Because that wasn't listed here on that the thing. So is there anything wrong with that tractor, that 37-year-old tractor?
You know, based on the age and the use that it gets, it also moves product around the transportation lot. You know, we've done some service work on that unit, and it's the appropriate time to replace it.
I'm not a farmer, but a 37-year-old tractor doesn't seem very old.
I think the versatility of this new piece of equipment will mean for the type of work that they need to use it for a wide variety of things. I mean, you got to think about how large the bus lot is, the types of equipment they get in. They replace wheel drums all the time, so you're taking things on and off the trucks. Those types of things is how it'll be used. It'll interchange with some of the other attachments that we purchased for the CTE machine, which will be huge when it comes to particularly things like snow removal and things like that. Again, we will transport this machine along with the CTE machine when we do the CTE trench training. And we'll be able to have two machines to train students on at the same time. So we'll kind of double up that use for that purpose. It'll also be available to the maintenance department for a wide variety of uses that they have, everything from landscaping. Because with the CTE machine, we have some large post hole diggers to dig for trees. Say post holes, but dig large holes for tree planting, things like that, to a trenching attachment and a backhoe attachment. So because the two machines match, they'll be able to be interchanged for those purposes.
Any other questions? Any further discussion? Okay, we'll move to the vote. The motion is for approval of the purchase of full-size and compact construction equipment. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll for the vote?
Mr. Stauffer? Mrs. Williams?
Aye.
Mr. Bickford?
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher?
Aye.
Mr. Guessford?
No.
Mrs. Murray?
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour?
Aye.
And Mr. Mackley?
Aye.
Did you get my vote?
No, we did not.
My computer's giving me problems. Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. I have 6 affirmative votes with the student member concurring. I have 1 no vote. Motion carries. Looking for a motion for consent agenda item number 10. Is there a motion?
For item number 10, I can make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford.
I move to approve the procurement of fleet vehicle purchase from Criswell Chevrolet at a total cost of $70,835.76 and the sale of the vehicles being removed from service.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Mrs. Williams, I'll second. This is Mrs. Murray.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Is there any discussion or any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs. Murray.
When we sell something like that, when we, that's older, but what kind of a price do we get from selling the older vehicles? What do we get back?
based on our most recent sales on GovDeals, a sedan like the Malibus that are listed here for sale, that are approximately 15 years old with north of 100,000 miles on them, will probably net about $750 to $800. The SUV, which is a 2004, may net in the area of about $1,500 as is.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yes,
Any
Mrs.
further
Williams.
discussion? Yes, Mr. Gesford.
How many vehicles do we have in our fleet right now?
In total, we have, and I'll give you a breakdown sort of by type. Passenger cars and SUVs, we have 45. Pickup trucks, which are predominantly used between the transportation department with the garage tech, as well as our maintenance staff, are 32. And vans, which are used between maintenance, food and nutrition services, and technology, is 55.
Is there any way possible that we could eliminate a few of these fleet vehicles while we're having such struggles with our finances at this time?
Anything is possible. We could definitely eliminate this procurement, but in an opportunity where staff are transferring between buildings, visiting other school sites, traveling to meetings, when a board car is not available, we pay mileage. Staff has done analysis on paying mileage as opposed to using the Board of Education cars, where we can leverage buying our own parts and not paying markup on parts, using our own fuel, which we see reductions on based on our procurements, and of course our reduced hourly rates for repairs compared to what we would have at a what's factored into the federal IRS rate. We can actually provide the cars to our staff at a cheaper rate than we can provide mileage to staff. So staff believes, based on that analysis, that keeping up with the fleet is the more fiscal measure than paying mileage to staff as they transport between buildings.
And since we've gotten so wonderfully experienced with Zoom, do you think we should be maybe doing some more Zoom meetings between staff and schools instead of driving out to the schools?
We can, but I think there's a lot of merit to the staff visits in schools. So it's curriculum staff actually physically observing teachers and providing additional guidance to teachers in a classroom setting as they're working with students that potentially wouldn't be as fruitful on Zoom, but I would defer that to curriculum staff. Definitely, our maintenance staff, our operations staff, as they're moving between buildings, again, checking on projects, meeting with custodians, walking through buildings, addressing other needs in the buildings, all requires transport between buildings. So, I mean, some of it we could potentially do electronically, but there is merit to the face-to-face interactions with staff.
And do we have the money in the budget to purchase these vehicles this year from the last year's, or the budget that we approved last year? So I would assuming that the money would be coming out of that budget. Do we have that money in there right now as a standalone to purchase these items?
We do. These items, there is a line item for procurement of vehicles within the transportation budget. This procurement will actually run over that line item, but in that category, within the transportation department, we have savings from this year on additional pay from drivers earning overtime that they didn't earn here over the spring as we've been closed, and from savings in diesel fuel, not only for our own drivers and our own buses, but also for contract drivers because they've not been on the road. So we're utilizing those savings to make an impact on our fleet. We have, when we talk about the cars, after this purchase, we'll still have 9 sedans that are roughly era 2004 to 2006 that we probably should consider replacement if we want to maintain a 15-year replacement cycle on our cars, similar to we do our buses. So we're taking an opportunity with those savings to try to work into the fleet to keep it of age.
Yeah, but sometimes savings needs to be put back for a rainy day, and we have student issues and student needs, teacher needs, and maybe not so much transportation needs, but I understand what you're saying. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Murray, you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to ask Mr. Prue. I know within the county, the county allows their employees to take their vehicles home. How many of our vehicles actually go home with our employees?
Our transportation staff, our assistant supervisors and the supervisor of transportation take a vehicle home from roughly middle of October to the middle of March, when there's risk of inclement weather, so that they can leave from their home to dispatch out into the county to check on roads. Other than that, they don't use a take-home car the rest of the year. Eric Michael, who is supervisor of PE and athletics, utilizes a car during the school year only because he attends nightly athletic events throughout the county and other events. He also goes to district and state events, so he has a take-home vehicle for that purpose. Other than that, those are the only take-home vehicles.
So no other mileage is being put on our vehicles except for business?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Stauffer?
Now you're unmuted.
Okay. That thing keeps clicking back on when I unmute. It goes back to mute right away. Anyhow, Mr. Crew, how many of these cars in our fleet, if you know, if you don't know, it's okay, on average are on the road every day? I mean, is the whole fleet out every day, or a good portion of a week, or what?
I think the vast majority are, Mr. Stauffer. I don't have specifics, but I can say that, you know, we allocate some of the fleet to various departments. So, you know, for instance, our cars that, let's say, stay here at the Center for Education Services, there are several assigned to curriculum staff. There are several assigned to the Birth to 5 staff that I know they even keep materials in, so they don't have to move them in and out of the cars, so they can take them on a moment's notice. We have a few cars assigned at schools to assist staff with meeting the needs of students. Our PPWs are in their cars every day and also assisting with transport for some of our homeless students. And then, of course, the parts of the fleet that are our vans and trucks really move on a daily basis because there's staff moving between buildings, working on projects, moving supplies, and so forth.
Anyone else? Mr. Prue, I have a question. In the information that I have that was provided, it says that we would be utilizing Montgomery County government contract. By doing so, does that afford us a cost savings?
It does. Anytime we found as on a typical basis, anytime as opposed to just, you know, going out on the street and doing a procurement on our own, if we can piggyback off a larger agency. So typically on vehicles, we look to Montgomery County, or I believe the other is the Sourcewell contract, which is a national contract. That contract, the drawback to that contract is that it often is a significant lead time because that car is actually built as you do your procurement. So and currently with the pandemic, there is no timeline for any of the replacement and on when those vehicles would actually show up. But those two bids are our go-tos and often competitive with each other. Bakeville always sources both as we look at new vehicles, and we make a decision based on the pricing and what vehicles are currently available or what needs to be built and what the timelines are to bring the procurements forward.
Thank you. Mr. Stauffer, did you have a question? I'm seeing your hand raised.
Yes, I was just looking at something. 2004 Blazer that's going to be replaced has 30,420 miles on it, and the year-to-date maintenance is $6,438.42. That low a mileage vehicle, that's just the maintenance cost for this year, $6,438.42.
Yes, sir. That vehicle is currently failing, and with the information we provided the board as they requested questions, the lifetime maintenance is 13. So you can see over the first roughly 15 years, the maintenance was minimal. but that vehicle is failing, and we've put 6,000 into it just this fiscal year.
Well, how comes, since it's only got 30,000 miles on it?
I don't know the specifics of the repairs, but I'd be happy to get that information for you.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing that. That's really low mileage on a 16-year-old vehicle. I mean, my vehicle's 2.5 years old and got 46,000 miles on it. And I haven't had that much maintenance problem. I just wondered. I'd like to know what's wrong with that vehicle. Yeah.
I'd be happy to share.
Mrs. Murray, I see your hand.
I just have one more comment to make. Perhaps it's because it was just around town driving. I've always heard that when you drive, well, this is what the mechanic told me. Take your car out on the road every once in a while, because around town driving, doing just around town driving is hard on a car. That's my comment.
Thank you. Dr. Michael, I see your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to comment. I think one of the lessons we learned out of this particular vehicle, it's been in the facilities side, not the maintenance side of the house, for many, many years. And it's driven typically to large project sites, so it probably doesn't get as much mileage. It also probably gets, as Mrs. Murray's described, a lot of in-town mileage. Mr. Prue, has a plan, and we implement this on the other fleet cars. So like the new cars will always go into what we call our out-of-town pool. So what we hope to be our most reliable cars, our newest cars, would be in the fleet that would go typically to Baltimore, Washington, or to conferences, where people would drive a car to a conference, things like that. So they have a very reliable vehicle. If one of our other vehicles break down here locally, it's a lot easier for our service staff to, get another vehicle to the staff member. Or if it doesn't start at a school or something like that, it's not near as big a deal as somebody being stuck in, a city somewhere. I think one of the lessons learned from this 30,000 mile vehicle that's now past its useful life, unfortunately, with that many miles on, we would rotate. I think, Mr. Prue, you have a plan to rotate an older vehicle to that group of staff members, so it won't be used much, but it will already have a number of miles on. Do you just want to describe that quickly for the board?
Sure. So what the plan is actually is we would provide the new SUV to one of the assistant supervisors in transportation who's currently using a 2008 SUV. As I mentioned earlier, the supervisors in transportation, while it's a take-home vehicle, they're also out on the roads in the winter, in the dead of night, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, testing out roads. So they'll put more miles on, also visiting various regions, looking at bus routes, attending to if we have a bus incident somewhere, attending to those. So they'll get much more mileage on that newer vehicle, so keep it much more active. But also we're giving them a much more reliable vehicle as they're out in the winter, testing those roads for us. We're putting them in the safest vehicle we can. The 2008 SUV will then be dropped down into the facilities team, where it won't get as much mileage. If it isn't as reliable, it's not as much of an issue. But our best vehicles will go where we get the most usage out of them.
And any other questions? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. The motion is for approval of the contract, the Montgomery County government contract for fleet vehicle purchase. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll for the vote?
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Aye.
Mr. Guestford,
No.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Abstain until I get that information from Mr. Prue.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I have 5 affirmative votes, 1 no, and 1 abstention. And the student member concurs with the majority, which are the affirmative votes, so the motion carries. Okay, we'll move to number 17, item number 17.
Madam President, I move to approve the procurement of grounds maintenance equipment to EB's Lawn and Garden at a cost of $121,862.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Mrs. Murray seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Murray. Any questions, any discussion?
Yes, Mrs. Williams, I do have some concerns and questions. Again, we're purchasing an awful lot of vehicles, a lot of equipment, in a time when we really should be thinking about our future and holding back. I understand through conversations today that we found two mowers, and they're saying that they're a special mower. They found two of them that haven't been used in maybe almost 2 years, but yet we are purchasing 11 new mowers for different locations. I question why we had vehicles sitting in somewhere that haven't been used for even if it was a year. I'm wondering why we're holding on to them when we have needs at some of these schools. And I see some of these items that I question. I hear that they're backup mowers to other mowers, and we have mowers there that are capable of doing it, and we're purchasing other ones to add to that area. I'm concerned concerning that, and I think that, we need to look at this and really decide, why are we buying so many of these tractors, and replace them? Are we not maintaining our tractors? Because I'm seeing repair costs to tractors that are pretty exuberant, but I understand some of these have been around for, not so long. But I can't say that, mowers are needing to be replaced, as soon as some of these are. I have a mower that's an older mower, 20 years old. It's had very minimal repairs done, and I don't take care of it as well as I should. And I'm hearing that these repair costs, $8,000, $9,000. What are we doing? Are we not maintaining our stuff, our equipment well enough, or our staff not concerned about it? I just wish that we could maybe not purchase as many. I mean, if you have a need for, I know Sharpsburg, we're putting a new school down there, and they want new equipment. I understand that. But the ones at Sharpsburg, the one at Sharpsburg, if there was one, I don't know, there may have been two. Why do we need to do it now? Why can't those be moved to another school? Someone said that they're trash or they're junk. Well, they were working before, so apparently they must work somewhere. And are we going to sell them for pennies on the dollar? And I just wish that we could really think about our maintenance program on these, that they last a lot longer, because I would rather see the money spent on children. And I think a lot of people would agree that our children come first, and mowers, if we take care of them, I think they'll last a lot longer, especially if some of these are diesel. They shouldn't be having to be replaced as often as we are. So I won't go through the list of questions that I have, but I just say my concerns are that we need to really think about saving money instead of spending it.
Thank you, Mr. Gessert. Mr. Ridenhour, I see your hand.
Yes, Mrs. Williams, thank you. Could I ask Dr. Michael a quick question? I don't have the facilities book in front of me. Approximately how many acres do we have?
I think it's about 1,100 acres.
Thank you. And, I mean, that's a lot of land. That's a lot of area to mow, and it's not easy, and it's not easy on a piece of equipment. And we need to replace this stuff, and have a rotation. I have a half-acre lot to have it mowed. So it's I just feel like we should have, good equipment. It's cost efficient because if it works well, our custodial staff's not going to be sitting on a mower as long as they might be if we get an older, less efficient piece of equipment. So I support it's.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Mr. Stauffer, I see your hand.
Yes, I will say this. I initially raised some questions about this, which I sent to the superintendent and the other board members, my colleagues, concerned about the purchase price. And I agree with Mr. Gessford that, you know, I'd rather spend money on the children, on the students of this county. But I also realize that mowing some of this land is not like mowing a nice lawn and so forth. And there's a lot of acreage, as Mr. Ridenour has just said, and a lot, especially at the high schools, where you have to do it and so forth. So, but I also know this. I've been sitting here trying to reconcile how I'm going to vote. And I will say this, although I have concerns, you know, I believe the staff and the superintendent deal with this on a day-to-day basis, a lot more than what I do as a board member. And I know that deep down from working with the gentleman that Dr. Michael cares about students first. But I will vote in favor of this simply because although I have reservations, I know deep down in Dr. Michael's heart, he wants what's best for kids, but I also know that we do need good equipment. I would only hope, I'm sure looking at the details that he sent us in an email, this is my opinion, no proof of it or anything, but I would suggest that probably some of this equipment is better maintained than others. But I also see that some of the middle schools like Northern Middle, there's been just repair cost of $3,917.62. And I know that there's not a lot of grass to mow at Northern Middle, not like North High, which neighbors it. So I will vote in favor of this, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Any other questions? Any further discussion? Okay, then we'll move to the vote. The motion is for approval of the Sourcewell contract for grounds maintenance equipment. All those in favor, Dr. Bishop, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher,
Reluctant aye.
Mr. Gessford,
No.
Mrs. Murray,
Aye.
Mr. Ridenour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I have 6 affirmative votes, 1 no vote. The student member votes in the affirmative, so the motion carries. I think that takes care of all items under Mr. Gessford's amendment. We'll go back and pick up item number 8. That was Mrs. Fisher's amendment. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to approve the procurement of uninterruptible power systems, equipment, and installation to Daily at a cost of $429,363.
Thank you, Mr. Bickford. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Any questions? Any discussion?
Yes, this is Mrs. Fisher. First, I have 2 questions. I understand these are battery packs. Could somebody, first of all, explain to me a little bit about this battery pack?
So Mrs. Fisher and technology team is behind me. I know Mr. Alton and Ms. Ramsey are also on the line to bail me out if I need any assistance here. But the battery packs are plugged into the wall, just like you plug any unit in the wall to keep it charged. The network equipment is then charged, it is then plugged into the battery pack, and the source of power flows through the battery pack. In a situation where a school has a power outage, the battery kicks in immediately and keeps the servers online. So our phones stay online, the wireless network stays online, any data memory transfers, all of that stays online, and the school stays active for roughly an hour. During that period, it allows the staff to respond to the school, hook a generator if necessary to keep services for students and staff running, or to shut down the servers appropriately and have no degradation or loss of data. So it's really not intended to be a large scale supply, and really a battery of that nature to keep us going for hours would be exorbitant. But due to the volume of stuff in our network closets that are tied to these power packs, the battery supplies, the costs are high. But it's part of the infrastructure, part of the emergency operations plan. And truly, bad things happen to technology equipment when they crash because they lose power. So it protects the servers as well when they have that continuous power, and we can shut them down safely if we're not going to supply generator power. Mr. Alton, do I have that correct?
Yes, you do. Also, they also supply power to the security cameras, Jeff.
Correct.
All right, my second question is, and all these my decision relies on these questions. Does each school have its own generator of some type?
They do not.
Do we have generators spread at many of the schools, though, throughout the county? Say like at one at maybe the Clear Spring complex. Does that have one generator somewhere between the three of the schools?
Off the top of my head, I can't say for sure if there's generator power for any of the schools, but a generator that would be wired to all three of the campus schools would be truly a massive unit.
Because
if you lost power on the campus, that generator would have to supply to all three schools at one time. So it truly would be a massive unit. There's
okay. That's enough.
There's also an energy blip while you're waiting for the generator to kick in. There's usually is a drop in power when the generator kicks in. You'll have a split second of darkness before the generator kicks in. In that time frame, the servers would crash if you didn't have a UPS. So even with a generator, it's still safer to have the UPS to protect the systems.
Okay. If these are just battery packs, I just can't. Now, maybe if I'd see them or something, but I can't understand why they're so expensive, and they only last an hour or less each.
It's because of the amount of draw. You can buy them with varying degrees of size for varying degrees of the amount of time based on the voltage you're going to pull off that battery at any time. An hour is typically our standard so that we have an opportunity for staff to respond to the site and do the appropriate actions on the server.
I don't know. It just seems like a heck of a lot of money to me for batteries. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Any further?
Mrs.
Yes.
Williams,
Yes,
sorry,
Mr.
Mr.
Stauffer.
Yeah, when I read this, I didn't understand it. I still get the general idea of it. I think it's a lot of money too, but as many of you know on this board, I am not a techie. I don't pretend to be one. And so, if the tech department says these things are needed to keep the system up and running in an emergency and so forth, my tendency is to follow their opinion, because I have no other choice to do so. So if that makes sense.
Mr. Mackley, I see your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of clarify. So with these battery packs, let's say a circumstance where, like for example, students are taking standardized tests, and if there were a power outage, would this kind of allow the internet to stay up and prevent students from, being interrupted in something like that? That would be a huge time commitment.
That's correct. The network would stay up during a power outage. So if you were on a mobile device, a laptop, a tablet, you would still, of course, that device is powering itself, and the wireless would stay up, so you would have connectivity to finish your online assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Michael?
Yes, I was just going to comment. We have these units now, and I assume that these are replacement units for the ones we have. I think I remember helping to deliver the initial ones when we first got them. I can tell you from firsthand experience being in the building, when power goes out, one of the nicest things, almost more than the network being up, although I know our phones run over the network, is having phones, because parents immediately start calling that office number and wanting to know what's going on at their school. They're getting the text from their child that the power's out, their school going to be closed. Just having the office being able to have the capability to respond by phone is huge. I'm kind of like Mr. Stauffer to some degree. I can't describe, why they cost this much or that type of thing. But this is not just a battery out of a pickup, sitting on the floor with something. This is a technical piece of equipment. It's for a wide number, substantial number of sites. It's just bread and butter business in the technology world to have this type of backup. And like I say, for a big company, they would have something maybe last far longer than this. This is a stopgap measure, just till we can get there and get additional assistance. And we've relied on them many, many times, the units that we currently have. So I would have to defer to Bob or Chrissy or one of them for more information, or Mr. Prue, what's special about them, like Mr. Stauffer. I don't know that part, but I do know the ones that we have, how important they are, and they probably have outlasted their useful life.
Then I have a question. You said they keep the phones running. How come when we had a lot of power failures this past year, and even last couple years, we end up with people just using their own personal cell phones? They say the phones are down.
I have to defer again to Bob. I think that's a phone issue, not a power issue. So I'll ask Mr. Alton to respond to that.
Yeah, we had a different phone system provider back then. We had Vonage, which was internet based, and we now have Verizon, which is SIP based, and they're two different technologies. And that's why we had phone issues back when we did, because our phone system was internet based.
Okay.
Any other questions? Any other discussion? Mr. Mackley, I see your hand raised, or is that from a previous question? Okay,
That was
thank
still
you.
from before, I'm sorry.
No, not a problem. Thank you very much. Okay, if there's no further discussion and no other questions, we'll move to the vote. We're voting to accept the purchase of uninterruptible power systems, equipment, and installation. Dr. Bishop, would you please call the roll for the vote?
Mrs. Fisher,
A reluctant aye.
Mr. Guestford,
Aye.
Mrs. Murray,
A hearty aye.
Mr. Ridenhour,
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams,
Aye.
Mr. Bickford,
Aye.
and Mr. Mackley.
Aye.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. We have unanimous approval and the student rep concurs. So I think we have covered everything on this evening's consent agenda. Colleagues, have I missed anything? Are we good? Okay, we'll move then to the superintendent's report. Dr. Michael.
Thank you, President Williams and members of the board. Tonight, we're pleased to recognize the 2020 Maryland History Day State Competition winners. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Scott Berman. to bring us some updates and share some celebrations. Mr. Berman?
Thank you. Good evening, President Williams, members of the board, and Dr. Michael. Nearly 600 middle and high school students submitted projects online to present their extensive historical research at the 2020 Maryland History Day competition. The competition is a culmination of a year-long program from the Maryland Humanities Council. In Maryland History Day, students create original documentary films, exhibits, performances, research papers, or websites exploring a historical topic of their choice on an annual theme. Maryland History Day sparks critical thinking and helps develop skills in research and analysis, writing, and public speaking. Competitors at Maryland History Day have already won first or second place in their category at school and district levels. Students from 17 Maryland counties and Baltimore City received special awards designated for outstanding Maryland History Day projects that cover specific subjects. Next slide, please. The following students from Washington County were recognized as Maryland History Day State Competition Special Award winners. All special award winners are from South Hagerstown High School. Jason Kamler is their teacher. Carlin Blash earned the Major General John E. Morrison Award in Education and Innovation, sponsored by the National Cryptologic Museum Foundation. Her exhibit was entitled Ignaz Semmelweis, Pioneering Antiseptic Hand Washing. Brianna Simmons and Emma Weichert earned the Senator Thomas V. Mike Miller Jr. Award for Excellence in Government History. Their documentary was entitled The Eruption Against Corruption, Social Networking and the Arab Spring. Mackenzie McCarter and Hannah Weichert earned the special prize in labor history, sponsored by Bill Berry and Friends for their website, Fair Trade, Breaking Barriers by Bolstering the Developing World. Next slide, please. Also awarded was the Maryland History Day District Teacher of the Year to Beth Kromka from Williamsport High School. Ms. Kromka was selected for her commitment to the contest, the overall quality of her students' projects, and her continued work with students. Thank you, and congratulations to all the winners.
Thank you, Mr. Berman, and congratulations to our students and to our teacher. We're very, very proud of you and very excited for your recognition tonight. Mrs. Williams, I only have a couple other announcements. I know people were anxious about graduation announcement. We said we'd be making our announcement this week. I'm not prepared to make that tonight. I didn't check here in the last couple of hours, but we're kind of waiting to see if there's another press conference this week from the governor that may alter our plan at all. We've done an extensive amount of planning. I've responded to a number of emails. I know people are very confused by the executive orders from the governor and various things that are happening in various states, all of which have different rules than Maryland. My heart is to provide traditional graduation for everybody, and I wish that we absolutely could do that. Under the current rules, there is no way to provide a traditional graduation. I've had a lot of suggestions of spreading people out 6 feet apart and people believing that we could gather hundreds of people together in stadiums. We have no information from any county in the state that is doing such a thing with large gatherings of people. So I'm not seeing that at this point, but we are going to hold out another couple of days here to see if the governor announces anything different. You know, we've had questions about photo opportunities at schools. I do think there are possibilities of things like that. And obviously a lot of people stopped by school and, you know, stood in front of the sign, things like that. We just ask them to be careful when they do that, but, you know, they're welcome to do that, except our campuses right now are closed. We'd prefer they wait until we're open. But in any case, as soon as we hear any additional information we have this week, we will consult with the officials that we've been working with each week, and we will make the best decision possible for all of our students. We know it's been a challenging spring. You know, we deeply regret that things have turned out this way, particularly for our seniors, but we will do absolutely the very best we can for graduation. The last day for students will be next Wednesday, June 10th. So excited for them. Our seniors have wrapped up at this point. I do want to recognize and mention we know that during this COVID-19 closure of schools and excuse me, all the challenges at home, a lot of people working from home, a lot of people being at home, a lot of people being kind of cooped up for a long period of time. It's added a tremendous amount of stress, not only to our students and families, but obviously our teachers, staff members. We certainly recognize that. We recognize that there's a lot of questions about the future. I have people demanding that I tell them what's going to happen in September today. You know, that's 80 some days away. I just absolutely do not know. I wish I did, but we will prepare for it, a wide variety of options that might happen, but nothing's going to be certain for a long period of time. Dr. Bishop pointed out at one point today, a lot's occurred in the last 56 days. A lot has changed, and a lot will change over the next 80 plus days as we prepare for the new school year. But I do know that's adding additional stress to everybody. Again, students, staff, families, uncertainty about daycare, all those types of things. I know that the nationwide demonstrations that are going on right now have brought a whole variety of feelings to people. We recognize that. We're concerned about that. I can't speak for the board, but certainly support peaceful protest and recognize people's right to protest peacefully. I personally, and I think senior staff absolutely support our school resource officer. They're a vital member of our team, and they support students in a tremendous way. Our local law enforcement agencies, we know them well, and they work hard for our community. We obviously would not support anybody that is not working in the best interest of students, community members, anybody, law enforcement staff, whoever, that's not conducting themselves in an appropriate way at all. We are concerned about some of the unlawful protests and riots and things, and we know that's bringing a certain amount of emotion to people. So I just want our students to know we do have counselors available. They are working. Our social workers are available. We can contact you or connect you to other resources if we're not able to help you. If you don't know how to directly reach your counselor, you could reach out through your teacher. You could reach your administrator at the school phone numbers and email addresses that have been posted on our websites. And students, we will absolutely support you in any way that we can, whether it's stress from COVID-19 or recent national events. Also, we want to recognize staff have the same opportunity through our EAP program by contacting their supervisor, HR. We have a variety of people that can support staff and community members as well. And with that, Mrs. Williams, that completes my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Michael. Next on the agenda is personnel action. Dr. Bishop.
Good evening, Mrs. Williams, Dr. Michael, and board members. As we discussed earlier in closed session, there are several staff changes for your review. So at this time, I ask for your approval of today's personnel actions.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Is there a motion?
Madam President, I move to accept the personnel actions.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
Mrs. Fisher seconds.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Any questions for Dr. Bishop? The motion is on approval of today's personnel actions. All those in favor? Dr. Bishop, it seems odd that I would ask you to call the roll since you're presenting. So how about if I go ahead and call the roll, record the votes?
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bickford.
Aye.
Mrs. Murray.
Aye.
Mrs. Fisher.
Aye.
Mr. Ridenhour.
Aye.
Mr. Stauffer.
Aye.
Mr. Gesford.
Aye.
Mrs. Williams, aye. I have 7 affirmative votes. Personnel action stands approved as presented. Thank you, Dr. Bishop.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to reports to the board. First item here is board member committee reports. Are there any committee chairmen that would like to make a report or announce an upcoming meeting? No? Okay, thank you. We'll move then to miscellaneous business. And at this time, I would like to make a presentation. This is our student representative, Christopher Mackley's next to the last meeting. And I would like to recognize Mr. Mackley for his outstanding service as a student member to the board for the years 2018 through 2019 and 2019 through 2020. Mr. Mackley, in recognition of your outstanding service as student member of the Washington County School Board, July 2018 through June 2019, July 2019 through June 2020, we congratulate you and we thank you for your service. Board members, do you have any comments that you would like to make?
Mrs. Williams, I'd just like to say congratulations to Christopher. Chris, it's been a pleasure being on the board with you and serving together. I've enjoyed your company during our meetings. Being a fellow Wildcat, congratulations, and your next endeavors. Congratulations.
Anyone
Thank you,
else?
Mr. Gesford, and thank you, Mrs. Williams. I'll have more to say at the next meeting since that'll be my last, but thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Bickford, did I see your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Mike said, that Chris, it's been a pleasure to serve with you for the full 2 years. And it's really gratifying to see when student members throw themselves into the role, take it very seriously, and weigh in on various issues. And even most recently, you having done that as you worked out plans for options for graduations during this COVID time. So I wish you a lot of luck as you move on to higher education, and we'll see you at the next meeting.
Christopher, it's been a pleasure serving with you. You've been dedicated and diligent, and I wish you all the best. I know we have another meeting together, and I look forward to seeing you, or not, or at least hearing you at that meeting. Anyone else?
Mrs. Williams?
Yes.
I'd also like to say thank you, Chris. I have really enjoyed working with you. And since this is the last meeting for the school year, I would like to thank the school principals and the teachers, the students and the parents who've worked hard to continue their education with distance learning. And I hope all of them have a safe and relaxing summer.
Thank you. Mr. Stauffer, I see your hand.
Yes, I just want to reiterate what my colleagues have said to Chris. He's been an excellent student representative for 2 years, and I've enjoyed working with you, and I enjoy listening to some of your comments. You bring a fresh perspective from the student side. As you know, many of us have not been students for many, many years.
Thank you. Mrs. Fisher, did I see your hand?
Yes, ma'am. I'd also like to thank Chris for his service. He has been very gracious. He is quite a gentleman. I appreciated his comments. He often joined us at dinner, and we had some nice conversations. But I wish you all the best in your future, and maybe we'll see you back this way sometime involved with education.
Okay. You may have noticed, colleagues, that we did not address future agenda items, and that's because I have no future agenda items listed. Should you have something that you would like to see on a future agenda, please let a member of the Agenda Planning Committee know, and we'll take care of getting that on a future agenda. We'll move now to board member comments. Mrs. Fisher, would you like to begin?
Actually, I don't really have anything else to say this evening. Just everybody stay well and hang in there. We'll get through this.
Thank you. Mr. Bickford.
I'd just like to thank the parent groups that have been organizing celebrations with student graduations. I've been getting lots of feedback that the students and parents really appreciate it. I know we have our task force working on our own school sanctioned events that will be following the regulations that we have at the time. But it's also fantastic to see other people pitch in the community to find ways to honor our seniors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Murray?
Yes, I'd like to say that I really enjoyed watching the Williamsport High School parade around my neighborhood on Saturday. I don't know whether Mr. Mackley was in one of those cars or not, and if he saw me waving to all of them, but I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was a great way to celebrate our seniors.
Mr. Gassford?
Yes, I'd like just to congratulate all of our seniors getting through this. It's been a very tough year for them and a very memorable one, I'm sure. As Mrs. Murray said, Williamsport had a wonderful parade. I was a part of the Tammany Development celebration, and they came through there. I was so surprised to see how many parents that were with them celebrating. Parents, they would stop and talk to you and just say how appreciative they were for the neighbors to having signs and celebrating their son or daughter this way. And so I think that is a memory that most students that have graduated, not only in Williamsport, but all over the county, that will remember and take that special moment that no one else has had and that forever. And the joy and the celebrations of the students that had their gowns on through the parades, it really meant a lot to them. And I applaud the parents, as Mrs. Murray said, and Mr. Bigford, of them taking the initiative and working with other parents to find ways to celebrate. And the communities have gotten together, not only just in this area, but in Smithsburg. I know there's been parades everywhere. Downtown Bispa, they had a parade. So congratulations to everyone that has been a part of that, because that has been a very special memory to the students and the families that were able to celebrate this very unusual time. So congratulate everybody on that. Job well done.
Thank you, Mr. Gassard. Mrs. Fisher, I do see your hand. I'll circle back to you after I get Mr. Stauffer and Mr. Ridenhour. Mr. Stauffer?
Yes, I just would reiterate what all my colleagues have said. Seniors, it's been a rough time for you, but you'll look back and you'll perhaps have a different perspective on this. It'll be a story to tell to your children and your grandchildren of your senior year, the last 3 months of your senior year in high school.
Thank you, Mr. Stauffer. Mr. Ridenhour?
Yes, thank you. I apologize to Chris. My battery is just about dead on this computer, so I'll be quick. I wish everybody, all the seniors, I apologize that we can't do what you might want us to do, but you'll never forget this, and we will never forget you and the efforts that you put into.
And I think we may have lost.
There we go. Good luck and Godspeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Mrs. Fisher, circling back to you.
I'm sorry, I just forgot to turn my hand off earlier.
Oh, okay. Okay. Dr. Michael, do you have any further comments?
Well, I guess I just want to congratulate all of our students, obviously our seniors, but our other students, that we still have a week yet to go, a week and 1 day. So I appreciate all their efforts with distance learning. We certainly appreciate the parents who have become the teacher at home. I've obviously communicated with a lot of them. It's not the job they signed up for, but like our students and our teachers and everyone else, it's not the job any of us signed up for on March 13th or 12th, when the governor made the announcement about closing schools and the direction we were going here for the spring. As many of you have indicated, it's not the spring we wanted, particularly for our seniors, but for all of our students, it's been difficult. And we just encourage you, like Mrs. Fisher said, hang in there. We're going to get through this. Somehow we'll be better for it, although it is very challenging in many different ways. We will be making an announcement about graduation before the end of the week with some details, and then there'll be more details to come as soon as we have all those things finalized. Again, we want to wait for a little bit more information, make sure we provided the very best opportunity we can. I'll be sending a thank you note, letter, email to staff members, but I would, like we have, while we have the opportunity, certainly thank them. Obviously, they have a ways to go here to finish the year, but thank them for all of their hard work during this distance learning time. Thank you.
Mr. Mackley, I see your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to share that I was participating in my school's senior parade the other day. So I just wanted to thank the Williamsport community and thank all of the communities that are throwing kind of parades for their graduating seniors. And I also just wanted to share that kind of with the nation's current focus on racial inequalities, I just wanted to share my pride in the school system for making efforts to deter racism through our revision of the diversity policy in May and the adoption of our educational equity policy in April. And I hope this board can continue to promote equitable policies in all instances, just so we can ensure that racism continues to hold no place in our school system. And other than that, I'm looking forward to my last meeting later in June. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mackley, for your eloquent remarks. Okay, I see no other hands, so if there's nothing else, we'll stand adjourned.